Hello, my name is Mads Schmoll and I'm your host for tonight. Welcome to our virtual tasting for The Gathering. It might seem like The Gathering ends with the end of the month, but tonight's tasting is all about sharing the whiskey love with all of you. We hope you'll agree that the spirit of members coming together over a dram is something we can continue to celebrate year round. With this tasting running in a slightly different format, there's no secret shopping link tonight. However, if you wish to purchase, you're in luck as we still have a few of these very special bottlings left, including 82.35 Jammin' with Apfelstrudel on a Beach, 35.293 Late Night Pantry Raid, and 53.376 Rekindled Romance. Just to take you through the running order of the drams tonight, we'll be starting with 35.293, moving on to 41.140, then it's 82.35, 68.60, and 53.376. This is the point to make sure you have your tasting mat ready. If you've chosen to use any of our food or beer pairings for tonight, be sure to let us know in the comments. If you're tuning in after the live tasting, welcome. Please let us know which drams you've enjoyed on any of our social media channels. We'll be delighted to hear about it. Finally, if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to comment and we'll take it from there. But without further ado, I would like to introduce you to my co-host for the evening, who you all know very well. It's the one and only John McCheyne.
Thank you, Mads, and hello, everyone. Yes, as Matt said, my name is John McCheyne, and I'm very pleased to be an ambassador with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. I've done lots of these things, and I've met lots of you. So I love the gathering because in Scotland we talk about gatherings as being the gathering of the clans, the gathering of the clan or the clans. But we in the SMWS, we're a clan, and it's great for us to get together like this. Not with kilts and claymores and all that kind of thing, but with lapel badges and the love of fine whisky. I always say to people that, in fact, new members who get the magazine for new members might have seen me in the magazine talking about whisky in Esperanto, would you believe? But Esperanto wearers have a lapel badge too. But over my life, thankfully, the whisky lapel badge is taking prime importance. And I love to meet members anywhere in the world who are wearing the lapel badge because it's a little sign. And sometimes in a place where it's nothing to do with SMWS, you can meet someone who's actually a member, from the badge. So let us know where you're looking in from tonight. There's Anne Bingham already. And Anne is the one who actually gave me this badge. This is an old, very old badge, which I had lost many, many years ago. And Anne actually gave me that to make up my little collection of lapel badges. But let us know where you're from. Say hello. As Mad said, let us know the drams that you like. Any little points or stories that you've got to add, we'll be delighted to hear them. And if you're watching us later, if you're watching this after tonight on record, then I hope you enjoy that too. With Jim W. actually contacted us through the week. This is his first live tasting since he recently joined. I think he's going to be watching it record. So hello, Jim, and you eventually get to watch it. Now,
Welcome.
Our big out turn is tomorrow. A big out
It
turn tomorrow.
is
There, there,
9
there was a
a.m.
there was a six bottles on preview today. So some of you will already have seen those. And this is the last out turn before the big out turn in November, which we're all looking forward to. So let us know what you think about the whiskies and what tasting notes that you're actually enjoying. Remember, there cannot be a wrong answer. It's a very personal thing. If those of you who get Whiskey Mag, if you look towards the back of the magazine, every month there's two whiskey experts tasting a series of whiskies and giving their opinion, tasting notes and score. Sometimes you would think they were talking about the different whiskies, so each person can get something very different. Probably depends a lot on what you've experienced through the course of your life. Now, also Unfiltered was released yesterday. So some of you might have had a chance to look at that yet. And there's very much a whiskey and beer theme this month. Fantastic, because in Glasgow we just love our Hoff and a Hoff. I remember Hoff and a Hoff from when I was a young man. And we've also featured curry How you drink whiskey with curry. Now that reminds me of something that some of you might not know. Scotland has given so much to the world over hundreds and hundreds of years. Refrigeration, radar, telephone, TV, anaesthetic, you know. Winston Churchill said, apart from ancient Greece, maybe the Scots have given the world more than any other small country. But, when we're talking about curry, we also invented in Glasgow chicken tikka masala. That was invented in an Indian restaurant in Gibson Street. So there you are. It's great. It's great that we're talking about beer and curry. And especially tonight, we've got a couple of beer suggestions for the whiskey.
We do.
Compton Mackenzie, who wrote Whiskey Galore, said a beer doesn't taste like itself unless it's chasing a dram of neat whiskey down the gullet.
Well, we'll have to put that to the test.
Preferably 2 drams. So there you are. And tonight we're going to be talking about difference in cask, different casks can make. Dr. Jim Swan, a famous whiskey man, once said, "The transformation of new spirit into mature whiskey is as miraculous as the change from caterpillar to butterfly. The chrysalis is the oak cask." So we'll talk a bit about the effect that the oak cask, the different oak casks treatments that we've used for these whiskey tonight have had on the flavour. Thank you very much.
I think we're just about ready to move on to the first dram, but I want to give a wee shout out to Frank and Helen in Peebles. It is their first live tasting since joining the SMWS. So welcome,
Brilliant.
Frank and Helen. Let us know what you think at the end of the tasting, and we hope you'll enjoy it.
Absolutely.
And we've got Klaus tuning in from the vault. Klaus Bish now.
Oh, Klaus! Oh, I'm actually meeting Klaus tomorrow in Greville Street.
There you go.
Look forward to that, Klaus.
So, Klaus, let us know what you think, or let John know what you think tomorrow about the tasting.
Absolutely.
And with that, we'll crack on with the 35.293.
Sure.
Which I think so for this one, in terms of pairing, I'd be curious to see what everyone else came up with. I thought biscotti or amaretti biscuits, and then couldn't actually find any in the shop. So please, if you have this particular pairing, let me know. If you've chosen something else, also put it in the comments, and take it away, John.
Absolutely. Now, 35, late night pantry raid, a very, very popular distillery with our members. Bottled lots of casks from 35 over the years. This one is sweet, fruity, and mellow. Now, what's happened with this is we matured this in a bourbon cask and then transferred it to a Sauternes wine cask. Now, sometimes what you're trying to do when you taste our whiskey, single cask, single malt, is you're trying to determine what flavours are coming from the new make spirit and what have come from the cask. So here you have a kind of additional job to do. What flavours have come from new make spirit? What did the bourbon contribute? And then what did the Sauternes cask contribute? Now, Sauternes, as you all know, is a very sweet wine. So a lot of sweetness, you would think, had been added to this whiskey as a result of that. But I think it's still got a range of flavours. So let's see what you think. And I'll maybe talk about what I was getting from it as I nosed it before.
I think one of the interesting things about this cask is also that it was supplied to us by our partners at Speyside Cooperage, and also Sauternes cask first fill Sauternes barrique is something you don't see quite as often. So I'm curious to see what everyone makes of it as well.
Now, my nose ain't going to be so good tonight, folks, because I've got a bit of a cold. So, but I've nosed and tasted the whiskey before, so I'll probably be referring to that previous experience I had. And what I was getting was certainly a mix of fresh fruit, no doubt about it, pineapple, kiwi fruit, but also some sweet Danish pastry type flavours as well.
Yeah, I got a lot of kind of vanilla custard and some tart red berries, as well as a bit of caramelized banana, actually. I think you can get banana occasionally from sweet white dessert wines.
Yeah. I mean, it just it's one of those whiskies which you exactly sit and sniff all night long. It's so pleasant on the nose, isn't it?
Whiskey Julian's got a bit of lychee, and Russ is saying the amaretti biscuits are spot on, which makes me very happy.
Very good, very good. I'm going to try. I've got a little biscuit here, so we'll see. Well, that's excellent. That's excellent. 58.1%. It kind of belies strength, really. Definitely, it's like almost like a Pim's cocktail on the palate. Definitely liqueur, fruit liqueur. So fruity and sweet. That's lovely.
I got some dark fruits as well, and almost a hint of varnished wood. I wouldn't say it was like as close to a grain as it could be, but sometimes you can get that parallel between dessert wines and grains.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jonathan James is actually getting bananas on the nose and a little bit on the palate as well. So I'm happy I'm not alone in that.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
I do think you could quite easily pair this with milk chocolate as well, though, or wafers, like vanilla wafers, maybe even strawberry wafers, because there is quite a bit of fruitiness in this dram.
I also actually think, Mads, it's a beautiful dram on its own as well. You know, I mean, sometimes like what we do these days is that we're a bit more sophisticated, we think, than we used to be in the old days. When a half and a half meant slinging the whiskey back and then tasting the beer. But so we like to explore the flavours these days in a kind of culture, a connoisseurship kind of way. Sometimes you can just sit back of an evening, listening to music or something like that, and enjoy some of these drams. Maybe not quite as strongly as you enjoy them together with other people, and you've got a memory of a place and an occasion. But whiskey can be drunk anytime.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one of the things that kind of comes out, or has certainly come out in the gathering, is how much members love music and whiskey. And our Lynn events in London were really popular. We've got the one still to come in Glasgow. But listening to music and having a dram, whether you're in good company or whether you're on your own, it's really something special.
That's right. That's right. Anne saying Tunnocks waivers. Well done, Anne. That must be your weekend in Scotland is giving you that notion. I saw Anne at the West Brewery event last Saturday and also on Sunday in the Bonaccord.
I think as well, I had thought maybe something with coconut, so like a coconut macaroon could have worked as well. And Daniel Flett is saying Drifter, which is a chocolate bar, if they still existed. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that chocolate bar, so I'm going to take your word for it, Daniel. But it does sound good.
See, Mads is going to mention coconut macaroon, and those of you who know me quite well will know I'm a bit of a Partick Thistle FC supporter. And whenever MD mentions macaroon, it takes me back to that stadium when I was a young boy, when they used to have a guy coming round the crowd selling macaroon bars, And that's what I always remember whenever somebody says or gives me a macaroon bar. There you go.
I'm going to try this with a bit of water and see. Whiskey Julian's just said he gets a bit more of the Sauterne influence with water.
Okay.
And Anne is saying a drifter is just like a Tunnocks wafer, which is good to know.
I thought the water did bring out a bit more of the sweetness, actually.
Yeah.
About it. Yeah. I was getting more ripe fruit with a little touch of water and even some licorice.
Yeah, I could see that. There's a bit more wood influence, certainly.
Yeah.
It's not bitter by any means. It's quite, I would say it's quite fruity, but I think it harkens back to that kind of varnished wood note a wee bit.
Yeah, sure.
Russ isn't sure about the Maltesers. Do you know, Russ? I've got Maltesers and I'm not sure about the Maltesers either. But, you know, you win some, you lose some.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you just got to try different things, don't you?
Mm-hmm. That's what it's all about.
Well, I think we're nearly done with this dram. How do you feel about moving on to
Aye,
the next one?
if George saying always a jambo, yeah, no harm in being a jambo, George. Mads probably doesn't even know what that is, do you?
No.
It's a Heart of Midlothian supporter.
Okay.
I
You
tell you
learn
what,
something new every day.
I tell you what, folks, it's something I forgot to mention, which I meant to do at the start. You may have noticed, those of you who follow us regularly, Mads hasn't been around so much in recent months, you know? Well, Mads took herself off. She was very, very busy preparing for her big day. And Mads got married in August.
I did.
And as the best man at my wedding said, you got to get married sometime. You can't be happy all your life. Sorry, Mads.
No, you're fine.
But she's back with us. I think she's retaining her name, though. Are you?
Yeah, for work. Well, for work,
For
yeah,
work wise. For work wise,
yeah.
yeah.
So,
Okay.
but yeah, no, it's been lovely having the time off. But I have to admit, I was very happy to be back on this tasting. I have missed it.
Yeah, sure, brilliant. And that's that dram we've just had. I mean, I was talking about the two types, the new make spirit and the two types of cask. I mean, the spirit from 35 is known as being sort of fruity
Mm.
and clean, you know. And here we have a fruity, clean spirit, which is people have mentioned things like banana and butterscotch and stuff like that, and caramel, which you'd probably expect to get from the bourbon wood. And then the Sauternes wood is given all that added sweetness that we've all been talking about, you know,
Mm.
ripe red fruit and treacle and that kind of thing, you know, Torrance caramel wafers. So yeah. So it's a good example.
And it's a
Well,
great dram to start on as
oh
well.
yes, absolutely.
And thank you everyone for your very kind wishes. I'm feeling quite touched. But yeah, and I mean, John and I actually we got together before this tasting to just run through the dram order and kind of where we would peg everything. I think it's one of these things that when you're hosting a tasting, you kind of need to have a think about what order you're going to enjoy them in. And I know quite often we would usually put the young and sprightly first, but for this one, we've actually put it in the middle, which we'll talk about a bit more when we get to that dram. But in the meantime, I think we're in quite a good position to move on to the 41.140 raindrops on pine cones, which for this one, we both agreed that an IPA was a good pairing. So I'm curious to see what different types of IPAs folk have. If you've gone for the IPA, otherwise maybe you've gone for something else. Maybe you've gone for the shortbread. Maybe you've gone for something else. So let us know, and we'll crack on with nosing this one.
Sure. Mine's is from a Freedom brewery based in Staffordshire, and it's a session IPA.
Yeah, I've got a Croatian IPA, which is a modern West Coast IPA, which I have to admit I do not quite entirely know what that means, but actually it is it's delicious and it's called Mechanics of Illusion, so I would recommend it.
Sure. Well, this is a dram which comes from a distillery, which is where the spirit is really known as kind of being quite rich and even sulphury. Yeah, but it's also it allows me to mention the fact that this distillery was used to create a different type of spirit that another distillery makes when that second distillery was closed for refurbishment. So in order to satisfy the blenders, they had to try to make that same whiskey in this place, and they kind of did it, but it was okay for going into blends. You know, there was enough similarity to make it valuable for the blends. But there's lots and lots of stories through Scotch whisky history where you've tried to create the same spirit exactly at another distillery, sometimes almost next door, with the same equipment, the same processes, the same fermentation time. In one case, even the former distillery manager was hired to run it and just could not get it like the previous distillery. And people refer to it as the weird alchemy of a specific place. Science can't really understand all of the factors that go into creating flavour in whiskey. Georgie Crawford, who used to be the manager at Lagavulin Distillery, who's ex-SMWS, by the way, I heard her giving a talk one night in London a few years ago, and she said that all she could say is every distillery has 1,000 little quirks, which is difficult to replicate anywhere else, you know. But here, they tried to do it, and it was suffice enough to go into a blend, but not as a single malt, the same as the previous distillery. It's just fascinating when you read these stories. But this one here, it's spicy and sweet. Yeah. We're talking about a refill bourbon hogshead for 12 years, 56.5%. And let's see what we think in this one. Raindrops on pine cones. Some of the names of our whiskies are fantastic, aren't they?
Yeah, I get a bit of green apple. I also get a bit of lemon sherbet on the nose. For me, I found this one quite citrusy, which is one of the reasons why I think John and I both came up with an IPA, because it seemed like a kind of like for like almost, which doesn't always work. I mean, I think you need to be quite cautious when you're pairing things that taste very similar, similarly, because they don't always work. So we'll see if they work in this case or not.
Absolutely. But you can go for similar or you can go for a contrast, Mads, as we know. And that's why we'll get to talk about the stout that I mentioned the next time. It was for the contrast. But here I was getting kind of wet leather. I was getting baked shortbread, which I don't know that you mentioned shortbread as a possible pairing thing. I was getting ripe banana and chocolate caramel, you know. And in the palate, I was getting lime marmalade on granary bread.
On the palate, I got like kind of a tartar version of the lemon that I had first. So it was more black currant and lemon juice with honey. So like a hot toddy, but without whiskey, which isn't really a hot toddy then, is it? But yeah, no, I mean, I could see the apple, and Bingham saying she's getting apple as well. And Whiskey Julian saying you could have mistaken it for a lighter sherry cask.
I can get that.
Yeah.
I can get that. Yeah. And I think when you say that, Julian, that's probably a reflection of the fact that the new make spirit has some of those qualities I mentioned that you often come across from sherry cask matured whiskey. So you're probably getting a bit of new make spirit in there, although it's been 12 years in the bourbon hogshead.
Yeah, I think there's I got a bit of lemongrass on wood, and a bit more furniture polish, not quite as much as I did on the first dram, but just a smattering of it. Keith says he's getting a bit of marzipan, and Russ says he's really enjoying the shortbread.
Okay, good.
And we've got a selection of IPAs. So Russ has got a Goose Island IPA, and Anne Bingham's got a Tularosa White IPA from Unity Brewery.
Okay.
So I'd be curious to know from Anne and Russ how you're finding the IPA with this dram. Does it work? Do you like it? Is it not good? Let us know. But yeah, I feel like this dram can be quite full on initially. I think spicy and sweet is one of those ones. It quite often I prefer them with water, but sometimes it's also a case of just letting it sit in the glass a while and coming back to it and having a sip and then coming back to it and just adjusting to the spiciness of the dram.
Yeah.
Because it can be quite full on at first, I think, especially with this dram.
And I think what we might as well tell them now, Mads, next year at the gathering, we're going to get all of the people from these islands together. From north of England, south of England, middle of England, Wales, Ireland. I'm going to challenge them all to say "hoff and a hoff" with a Glasgow accent.
Yes, and it will be a
Okay,
viral video. Yes, it
yeah, yeah.
will be heard around the world.
Yeah, I could tell you that our manager in China, Christina, she's been over here many times, and I've been over there several times, and we've talked about "hoff and a hoff" a lot. And Christina, Chinese, can almost say "hoff and a hoff" with a better Glasgow accent than me. There you go. So it's possible. It's possible.
So she might win that competition in the
She
end.
might win that competition. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So I'm hearing from Anne and Russ that it's maybe a bit overpowering, their particular IPAs. Mine is maybe not powerful enough. I don't know. I feel like I feel like the whiskey's maybe more powerful, as Anne says, than the IPA in this case. But maybe it's just about finding the right IPA. There are quite a few out there.
This one I've got is working quite well. I mean, the whiskey seems to have kind of lifted the kind of lightness, if you like, of the IPA. You know, and made it a bit more refreshing.
And what IPA have you got, John? Just out of interest.
It's called Freedom from Freedom Brewery in Staffordshire. So it's an English one.
Sounds tasty.
Yeah. It's only 3.8%, so it's session IPA. Citrus, tropical. Yeah. Doesn't tell me what the hops are. Very nice.
Frank's getting a bit of furniture polish as well. Okay, I'm not alone in that. Good.
Okay.
And Russell has added a bit of water, and he's getting golden syrup on the nose. I've just added a bit of water as well. Yeah, I can see golden syrup. I'm still mostly getting furniture polish, but we're all different. We're all going to get different things.
I'll tell you what's interesting about tasting notes, folks. Those of you who've been at tastings that I've held before, you've probably heard me saying this. There are two ways to nose and taste a whiskey, and that is read the tasting note first, and then go and nose and taste the whiskey, which means that you've just restricted your brain to thinking about those flavours you've just read about. The other way to do it is you to do it on your own and then look at the tasting note. Much more fun, and actually much more you, because it's your personal kind of thing, you know. There's an amazing scientific fact, actually, and I know that some of you will know this, that your olfactory bulb in your limbic system in your brain is next door to your memory and your emotion in your brain. Which is why often people will say, and we're going to come on to Russ in a minute, who the next whiskey, at exactly this point, somebody can take you back to a place and a moment. It's just remarkable. And I don't know about you folks, but whenever I'm tasting 5 or 6 whiskies, the first one or two, I'm butterscotch, banana, and caramel, and fruit compote and leather, By the time I get to the 5th one, I'm sitting on a Scottish hillside in the heather, overlooking the loch, with the breeze coming in across the heather, So I think it's much more expressive once you've had a few, but that's just all part of the fun,
Yeah, I think you do it is a bit of an exercise in imagination. I do find that the first dram of the evening is, you kind of need to maybe go for something that's comfortable first, or at least me, I go for something that's comfortable but maybe not overpowering, and then try different things throughout the evening. Ian's made a really good point there. He's saying he's getting the spicy but not so much the sweet, and he'll come back to it.
Yeah,
and I would say that for all of the drams.
What I found, Ian, was that when I added a little bit of water, sweetness came through much more, So if you haven't added water yet and you're going to save it for a wee while, maybe try it that way. I definitely had a lot more sweetness coming through with
Yeah.
the reduced nose.
I think as well, when we do these tastings, don't feel that you need to drink all your drams at once. That as we move on to the next dram, that you need to finish the previous one. One of the most beautiful things about these kinds of tastings is that the drams kind of continue to evolve in the glass. As they've been in the glass for a while, maybe you've added a bit of water, but also your palate changes throughout the night. So you might come back to that first dram or that second dram, and it'll taste completely different after you've had the third or the fourth dram. So it's worth bearing that in mind and coming back to them and just trying them at different points in the evening. Yeah, so let
Absolutely,
us know.
absolutely. And sometimes when you're sitting at home and you're trying to, like rate a whiskey or do a taste note for a whiskey, sometimes it's good to pour 2 glasses and just push one away whilst you're doing the first one. And then when you go back to the second one, you might find that it's kind of changed a little bit in the glass. Fascinating.
And even if you try one dram on one night and then come back to it the next night,
Yeah,
you will. Environment is such an integral part of your whiskey experience that it will taste different every time you try it. But that's part
that's
of
right.
the beauty in it.
Sure, absolutely.
And you're getting a wee shout out from Richard Turner. Here, I don't know if you know him, John.
Oh, hi, Richard. Good to see you here.
But
Been a
yeah, and I
while.
think.
Been a while, Richard, for obvious reasons.
So, what do you think, John? Are you ready to move on to
Oh
the
yeah, yeah,
next
yeah,
dram?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm happy if everybody else is. Yeah.
So, if everyone has been watching our Facebook channel or Instagram, you'll have seen that we popped out a wee post today for Russ, who's actually been quite active in this tasting. And Russ actually came up with the name for this particular bottling. We had a competition and a ballot, and Russ won. Russ won one of the samples, and he came up with this great tasting note. And he actually said, John, that he was inspired by channeling you at an earlier tasting where you had explained the tasting panel's process of trying to add personal elements in the note. So
Oh yeah, absolutely.
he closed his eyes, he cleared his mind, and just got the whole shebang, and that
Brilliant.
is
Well
the
done, Russ.
name.
Prob-
And Russ,
yeah, but I was
go
just want
ahead.
to imagine that just on that point, I might have told you this story before, Russ and the others, is that on a tasting panel once, I said to Ewan, who was the panel chairman that day, that I was getting leather from an old car. And Ewan said, "Very good, John. What make of car was it?" And that's not as daft as it seems. What he'd established was that if he's got a memory in his head and I can pull the detail out of it, it will make for a more interesting tasting note. And it just so happens that my brother-in-law has got a 1953 Rolls Royce, and that's what I was thinking about. So there you go. Sometimes it's worth giving yourself a couple of seconds, as Russ has done with
Yeah.
this, just to think, what's this reminding me of, and you can use one of those charts that we have on our website. You can download one yourself, which gives the sort of list of typical flavors for each flavor profile. So if you're struggling to get something, that might help. But then you can maybe take it a step further and say, is this actually reminding me of a place and a moment?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think the thing about Russ is he actually joined the society during COVID. So he's not managed to get to one of our venues, but he did get sent a tasting pack in June of 2020 as a well done for hitting a weight loss target. He's lost 11 stone, which is pretty much half his original weight. So well done on that, Russ. But he has joined almost all of our virtual tastings since then, and he has had every pairing that we've suggested, and you'll see it on the social posts, but also in the various Facebook groups for the virtual tastings. He always has every suggested pairing, and I am always so impressed and so chuffed. And I want to say cheers to Russ. Cheers to you. Well done.
Well done, Russ. Well done, Russ. And look at Anne Bingham saying it, an old Ford Anglia. If it had been my car, it would be an old Ford Anglia. And Miroslav is saying greetings from Poland. Good to see you, Miroslav. What the best.
I think this is a cracking dram as well. It's a young and sprightly dram, and as I said at the start, this, you know, we would normally maybe have placed this at the front, but young and sprightly can be a bit divisive in terms of sometimes it can just be a bit too assertive to start the evening off on. So we decided we'd put it in the middle, and we'd come up with one or two pairings for it, and just see how it went. And I think for this one, John actually suggested a stout or a porter, which I'm curious, John. I don't have a stout in front of me. I don't know. Do you?
Yeah, I've got one of Ireland's finest here. What I was thinking about that, and I'm interested to see what people say, and that is, I just thought the stout accentuated those sprightly citrus flavours in the young and sprightly. So all of a sudden it was exploding on your palate with those flavours that are there naturally. So it might be too much for some people, you know. People might not agree with me on that, but let's see what you think. Let's see what you think.
And if not, there's Milky Bar buttons.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Charles P. getting a bit of lime and chili on the nose. Daniel Flett, apples and custard.
Yeah, just try the whiskey first. If you've got a stout there, a porter, try the whiskey first. Then then take a drink of the beer, and then try the whiskey again. But remember, this is 64.4%. My goodness. 64.4%.
Russ has also got a bit of more insider info on some of the idea behind the name. So Jammin' was an alcopop band when I was a teenager, jumped out at me when I added water, and then conjured memories of the beach. Lovely. Anne Bingham's got coconut stout and a Guinness. So Anne, I'd be curious to know which one's the winner here, if it's the stout or if it's the Guinness.
No, I've just tried that, and it worked for me again, despite the fact I've got a bit of a cold. That. I mean, first of all, the young and sprightly whiskey is very young and sprightly. You know, it's very fresh and citrusy. Then we take a drink of the beer, and then do it again. It just explodes on my palate. I don't know if anybody else gets that.
So this is one of those contrasts, then.
Yes, yeah.
I think putting the young and sprightly at this point in the tasting, I'm actually getting a lot more sweetness out of it than I would if we had put it first thing at the start.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I think it's all of our members, you know, everything is constantly developing. I mean, there used to be a very traditional way of looking at a whiskey tasting, and you had young whiskey moving to old whiskey. You had the lighter whiskies moving to the peatier whiskies, and it's sometimes nice just to change them around a bit, because it can be an amazingly different experience. So more now, we in fact at London, a venue a couple of years ago, we started doing a peated whiskey, not last but second last, and then a grain whiskey to finish. And people loved it, because that whole idea that, well, if you drink a peated whiskey, you can't taste anything until a week on Tuesday, it's just nonsense, you know. It's you just need to try other things. So I think this is going really well in the middle.
I mean, I think sometimes as well, when you try a really heavily sherried whiskey, it's maybe not as assertive as peat, but it can be as assertive on the palate in terms of afterwards, if you were to go to a really light and delicate dram, you would still have that kind of sherry influence on your tongue a bit.
Sure.
So order matters, but at the same time, there are no hard and fast rules. So drink your whiskey in the order that you would wish to enjoy it in.
Yeah, the last thing we would ever want to say to your members, Mads, that there are hard and fast rules.
It's true.
Yeah.
And Anne is saying her coconut stout works great, and she's also getting a bit of chili and lime, and she's going to try it with some chili olives.
Ian's saying but the
yeah.
whiskey flavour bursting through it. Milky Bar soothes the palate again. Okay. Now, let me tell you folks that sometimes drinking whiskey is a bit like, if you can imagine listening to an orchestra, right, in a theatre, and the orchestra is going full pelt. You know, the bass and the percussion and the strings. Then all of a sudden, over there on the side of the stage, someone starts playing a piccolo. And over all of that music that's blasting out, you hear piccolo coming over the top clearly and identifying itself and making itself heard. And sometimes you can get a note in whiskey. It's like a piccolo coming over everything else. So you're sitting there enjoying the various flavours that you're getting, then bang, suddenly a note comes through that just suddenly appears. And for me in this whiskey, it was lemon cough drops. All of a sudden, I was just enjoying the whiskey and the flavours that we've been talking about, and bang, this lemon came over and almost it's a top note, almost dominated for a few seconds the rest of the flavour. So it's sometimes worthwhile thinking about that when you're drinking your whiskey, you know. If you get something really comes from nowhere strange, it's like that piccolo in the orchestra, you know.
And Frank, spicy lime peel followed by creamy almond, and Anne concurs, and she also says that olives are perfect with this. So there you have it.
Yeah, there you go.
I actually got a lot of kind of like strawberry toaster strudel, which is like a thing of my youth. I don't think it's as much a thing here. It's an American thing, but that, and actually foamy shrimps and bananas, which I'm very new to, having not grown up in the UK. But I did get a hint of those. And it's the first time I've gotten those on a whiskey, so I was very chuffed that I recognised that.
Well, and Mads, that's a typical example of what we're talking about, because there's something you recognise or remember from your childhood in another country. That's a very personal note to you. I'm never going to get that, you know.
No.
But like, people here from Poland and people here from south of England, and I might. Oh, look, here's John Lamond. He said that the less educated palate finds it difficult to fully appreciate a light whiskey after a heavily peated one. All right, okay, John. That's you know, it depends what you mean by less educated palate. I mean, our members are shown tonight. Their palates are pretty good, you know. But yeah, but I think that you should. I don't know if you've tried it, John, but if you haven't, let me know once you've done.
I think there is a lot of sweetness in this, but I noticed that on the palate, I thought it was again a bit wood forward. So I kind of got like star anise and mahogany. I thought there was quite a lot of wood to kind of get through there, and maybe a bit of cinnamon and vanilla. But I did get the kind of appley notes that other folk have been talking about. And I think as well, it will continue to evolve as it is in the glass. And I could see Anne in terms of the olives that briny chili olives would actually work quite well with this. And sometimes, savory is the answer. Savory with sweet.
Sure. And the other thing, Mads, and all the members listening, is that remember this. Like we are. If our tasting panel on any particular day just happens to come from Scotland, okay, we have international members, but some days it might just be Scottish people, or people who've not much experience of flavours growing up outside Scotland. Now if we say fruity, there's a list of fruits that the people on that panel will be thinking about when they're saying fruity. There's 2,000 fruits in the world. So if you're in China or Japan or America, or Mexico or Brazil, if you say fruity, you might be talking about something completely different. And that's been part of the strength of the exercise we've been going through this year, and our own country branches are doing their own cask naming.
Mhm.
And it'll be interesting to see some of the flavours that they come up with, And I've got a good friend, the Jamie Oliver organisation, Pete Big, and Jamie's a big member as well, and he's offered at some juncture maybe to try and translate the flavours that we recognise, maybe in Scotland, into flavours that might work better elsewhere. So it's an ongoing thing. We're always looking at new ideas to actually create a base for our members to enjoy the flavours from,
Absolutely. And Keith's getting bubblegum after adding water, and agrees with Julian about the water and whiskey, and it still being quite hard to tame. It is quite a feisty one, I would say. And Ian is saying that adding water has he's getting a lot more wood with having added water, which was my experience as well in this particular dram.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Right. Well, I think on to the next one then, which is 68.60 Sunshine on Cream Cakes, which again has a really fairly interesting cask story. In that it was matured in a recharred American oaks hogshead, which some would say are the workhorses of the industry. But they do deliver quite unusual and interesting spirit, and I think appearances can be deceptive with this one, and this is then been recharred cask, and it's in the deep, rich, and dried fruits profile. So I'm curious to see what everyone makes of this one, because it's got quite a deep, dark color, but I think it also has the flavors to match.
Yeah, and I think that so those of you who have read Unfiltered or are about to read Unfiltered, we've got an article in there about a trek around Perthshire to a brewery and a distillery, and that's a very interesting walk you can do yourself sometime as well. But this distillery comes from Perthshire too. Okay.
Oh, we've got quite a good question there, John, from Miroslav. So
Okay.
when I lived in Edinburgh, I visited both the SMWS, and I am used to combining whiskey with food, but for many Polish colleagues, it is a profanation of whiskey. Can it ever be changed?
I think, Miroslav, certainly things are changing here and have been changing for almost a generation of 20 years or so. And I know that in some parts of the world, there is still a view that, whiskey is kind of sacrosanct and should be drunk as whiskey and not messed up with anything else like beer or food. So I think that's gradually changing, Miroslav. And as your Polish friends travel to other countries over time, they will probably start to pick up the fact that there's a whole host of ways now to enjoy whiskey. It's not like it used to be. Certainly not here anymore. My father would be astonished at the idea that we're pairing whiskey with food, and that we're actually spending time talking about 5 different whiskies and the flavours. For him, it was just whiskey, whiskey and a beer. I don't think he particularly cared that much which whiskey it was, and that was a generation before mine. So you can tell by my age how my father was, but so that was a long time ago. But things have been changing very, very definitely over the last generation or so.
I think as well, it's one of these things where It is a perception, but also I think whiskey is a thing that, you know, you're meant to have fun with it, and especially with society whiskey. And that's one of the reasons we started doing the food pairings. And you know, it was kind of an added on thing that we did as part of the tastings, but it's really taken off, and it's actually quite fun to sit down now once a month and come up with these pairings and think about what works, because I think it just gets your brain engaged and a bit more active. And it's not to say that you couldn't do that without the food pairings, but with the food pairings, I think sometimes you uncover flavors from the cask that you might never have found otherwise. And it really is just about having a bit of curiosity and a bit of fun with it. And you know, that comes at both ends of the spectrum. So you know, you have your I was saying in a previous tasting, what I do is I get a whole bunch of snacks and I sit down with the drams and I try different things with different drams, and that's what works for me. But then you go to the likes of one of our venues like at Queen Street and you have, you know, a menu that's paired with whiskey where it's kind of been thought through, and it's nearly a fine dining experience, and it elevates it, and it's a different way, and there's different subtleties that will come out with that. But I think both are equally valid and should be tried. I think the most important thing is to just have fun with it and try it, because if you don't try it, you'll never know.
I think these days, and probably particularly in the younger and middle generations, there is what I refer to as a culture of connoisseurship, and people don't just want to experience different flavors; they want to know, why is that flavor different from that other whiskey? You know, they want to look into the reasons why these flavors are created. Because of what I said earlier about science, I mean, the answers aren't always there, but at the society, we can give you a clue from what we know about the processes and the geography and all that kind of thing, about why whiskies taste differently. But people want to enjoy it, and it's not just whiskey; it's other drinks as well. You know, so you know, people want to understand where the flavors come from and why they're different, and that's completely different from how it used to be.
And it's the spirit of the society. You know, we are the original game changer, and we will always continue to be. So maybe that's your job, Miroslav, is to be the game changer and the introducer of food and whiskey.
I'll give you an example how things change. I mean, many years ago, Pip Hills, our founder, before Unfiltered, our members magazine, there used to be a newsletter for members. And in the newsletter, Pip used to answer letters from members. So I have a newsletter up there way back to the late 80s. And he was asked by a member a question, and he said, "Dear Mr. McCallum from Stirling, thank you for your question as to why we don't bottle single grain whiskey. The reason we don't bottle single grain whiskey, Miss McCallum, is exactly the same reason that we don't bottle bleach." Now, how things have changed. When Pip's reminded of that these days, he thought, no, no. But that's just how attitudes have changed. And for some people, single grain is a new single malt, you know. So things are always changing. There's nothing about flavour that's hard and fast and can't develop over time.
Oh, for sure. And I actually had a single grain as the first whiskey that my husband and I enjoyed from our quaich at our
Is
wedding.
that right?
So
Okay.
yeah,
Very good.
it was a grain.
Yeah.
But back to this whiskey, where we're getting some good tasting notes coming through, including quince jam on the nose from Whiskey Julian, and he's saying that Rechar brings really interesting depth, and Daniel's getting treacle. Tanya's asking, what has she missed? Well, Tanya, we are on Sunshine on Cream Cakes, which is 68.60. So we're on the second to the last dram. So hope you've got a pack and you can follow along. Otherwise, this will be available to rewatch at the end. So you can catch up and have the other drams as well.
Daniel, I'm so with you on that treacle. I mean, on my taste note here, I've mentioned treacle 2 or 3 times. You know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I really get the dried fruits and toasted nuts on this one. I think it is very characteristic of its flavor profile, which sometimes you'll try one of something and our flavor profiles are deliberately very broad brush strokes. But sometimes you'll try it and it'll take a while to uncover why the tasting panel has made that decision. In this one, I think it's quite clear that it is deep, rich, and dried fruits. I even get a tiny bit of maybe like calf leather, and a hint of snuff actually. And Keith's already thinking of Christmas. He gets a bit of strolling, which is
Not Christmas.
not Christmas,
Not,
or you know what
not,
Christmas.
not the 30th of September. No.
It's not that far away anymore, John.
Not until after St Andrew's Day. No.
Well, I mean, we are getting into kind of darker nights. We're not quite in Korean weather yet, but I'd be remiss because Anne has actually pointed it out in the comments. Tomorrow is the deadline for if you have a whiskey den at home where you enjoy society bottlings or other types of whiskey, please send us a picture. And we have details on all of our social media channels of where to send the picture. But we're doing a wee unfiltered roundup of whiskey dens in November. So it'd be lovely if you have one to be able to share it with other members around the world. So please do that if you get the chance and you've got an excellent space, because we'd love to see it.
Fantastic, yes. And there's some amazing whiskey dens, aren't there? Mads, we've seen quite a few, so it's incredible.
Yeah, I have to actually put a shout out to our producer Laura, who's actually pushing all the buttons tonight, because she actually has a gin shed that also has whiskey, and it is incredible. Been following it throughout lockdown as she put it together, and I'm well jealous because I've got a flat, so there's no room for a whiskey den here.
One of our ambassadors actually has a shed built out in his garden.
Mm.
It's been featured and unfiltered and all that, but it's quite something. Yeah.
And we're getting Ian saying that this dram goes really well with nuts and raisins.
Yeah, I've got some nuts and raisins here. Yeah.
Blame Asda, because they've already got mince pies. It's kind of, yeah. I mean, you see the mince pies and your brain does go straight to Christmas. Jonathan is saying his whiskey den is a little cupboard. Well, you know, every space counts towards a whiskey cupboard. I'm at the point where I'm not really allowed to bring more whiskey home because there's not enough room for it. Need a bigger whiskey cupboard.
I remember once when I was still in Glasgow, I went into a bank, Royal Bank of Scotland, and they were playing Christmas music. This was November or something. And as I was doing my transactions, you had me over a little questionnaire. One of them was, "What do you think of the Christmas music?" And I wrote, "Oh no, not in here as well." And I handed it back to her. And just then the manager walked past.
Oh no!
And he picked this up, and he creased himself with laughter. You know, he always was a Mr. Scrooge like me. You know.
I will accept Christmas music usually after American Thanksgiving. That for me is the cutoff, because I'm still fairly in kind of autumn, you know, leaves and pumpkins and turkeys until Thanksgiving, and then
I don't mind it from the 20th.
From the 20th of December.
December, yeah.
But John, all the mince pies are going out of the shop by then.
Don't like mince pies.
Okay, well, fine. I think I'd be curious as well to know which pairings, if folk have gone for pairings for this one, what have you gone for? Have you gone for trail mix? Have you gone for, I think cheddar and grapes could have actually worked quite well for this one as well, to kind of balance out that sweetness. Frank's saying mixed nuts. And I'm curious, has anyone gone for a bit of dried fruit, raisins, something like that?
I've got mixed nuts and raisins here, which I thought went quite well. See, Anne was saying there she's got a pub in her, or she's got a garden pub set up or something.
Yeah, pub shed.
Yeah, see, John agrees with me. Christmas doesn't start until 24th of December. That's something we can agree on, John.
Oh, and Keith agrees as well. Oh no.
Yeah. We'll have to start a movement.
Frank, haggis and black pepper crisps, not so great. You know, sometimes you just have to try these things.
Yeah, yeah.
You never know unless you try. And Anne actually says, make your own mince pies. Yeah, I've tried. It wasn't particularly successful, but I've only tried once, so might have to just try again. Maybe this is the year. I won't tell you, John.
Well, I've never made a mince pie, so you can tell me how you get on. Nobody would eat one if I made it.
And has anyone added water to this dram? If so, what have you thought of it? I think it becomes a wee bit sweeter.
I was getting a bit of rum flavours when I added water, and definitely a bit of ginger, and even a touch of pipe tobacco.
Yeah, I definitely had snuff down, like a hint of snuff and a bit of leather as well. Not sulfur necessarily, but
Sure.
leather and snuff, kind of like an old satchel with a bit of
Sure.
tobacco left in it accidentally.
I mean,
Jamie's got a bit of ginger as well.
I mean, the actual New Make spirit here is known to be quite rich and nutty. You know, so and then we've put it in a recharred hogshead. So I think a lot of those rich flavours have definitely been accentuated. You know.
Definitely.
And yeah, absolutely.
Jonathan, James, water made it a little more vanilla, but no less punch.
Sure.
And John is saying that mince pies go well with chips, salt, vinegar, and brown sauce, which isn't a whiskey pairing, but I'd be curious to know what flavour profile you'd pair with that, John.
Yeah, brilliant, John. Yeah. John's a whiskey tutor. Yeah, a few of us have been on his course. Yeah.
Excellent. Fab. Well,
I'll see you next week, John. Actually, won't I?
Anne's getting new handbag leather as well.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think it's subtle, but it is there. But yeah, it's a beautiful dram, and I think it's I think this is one that you could sit there kind of all night and you'd get different things out of it every time you tried it.
So. I think that's a great point, Mads, because that's the one. I mean, I remember doing a tasting note for Unfiltered a few years ago. I mean, and it must have been the longest tasting note I ever did. And at the end, I was saying I'm just flip-flopping here between those kind of flavours and these kind of flavours and back and forward again, you know. It's just so interesting. I remember last year opening an Arran, a 121, right? And I already drank half the bottle, and I had this dram. I thought, oh my goodness, this is brilliant. This is the best dram I've had this year. But why did I not think that when I was drinking the half of the bottle, which I'd already gone through? And it just, it's one of those examples of how at the right moment, the right time, something just works, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, deep, rich and dried fruits on paper was always the flavour profile that when I joined the society, I thought that will be the clear winner for me. And then actually I quite struggled with it because I get a lot of sulfur in this flavour profile, and it's not always unpleasant, but it is quite potent for me. And it's taken some time to kind of work around my perception of that flavor and see how I feel about it. And I think water in this case is your friend, but also it's worth kind of trying different distilleries and from this flavor profile and just continuing to try and innovate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just such a wonderful thing to play with, these flavour profiles and all of that, because I mean, as a discovery around every corner, things that you think you don't like. We had a whiskey at Liverpool festival last week.
Mhm.
There's still a bottle of it in London, I think, but it's a 66, and it's a peated spirit. But we transferred it from, after quite a few years, from Hogshead to an ex Oloroso
Mhm.
cask, and the flavour profile was not peated; it was deep, rich, and dried fruits. And it just shows how. And I tried lots of people came up and said I don't like peaty whiskey or I love peaty whiskey, and I was saying try this, and
Mhm.
everybody loved it because everybody could kind of get the point of what the cask had achieved
Yeah.
with the new make spirit in that one. It's so different.
Well, and I think that's the thing with the society is that, especially with tastings like these, it doesn't matter the age of the whiskey that you're trying. You can try something that is 9 years old and it can taste far older. You kind of need to remove those preconceived notions of what it's going to be and just experience it for yourself.
Absolutely.
Because things can taste older, they can taste younger. I mean, I loved it. John actually did a tasting for the marketing and brand team on Friday, and there was one whiskey, and we didn't know the age of it, and we were like, "Oh, is it really that young?" We thought it was much older whiskey. So even us, where we're around it all day, there are still surprises for us, and that's one of the beauties of the society. I think is just this idea that you go into it and you have one expectation and it can be completely different but equally wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Jamie's got quite a good question there about limiting the sulfurous elements of a dram. I'll let you answer in a minute, John. For me, getting around it has been about trying more drams and just experiencing it and kind of becoming familiar with that flavor. But it's also been about adding water, which I know we recommend at the society, that you try it neat and you try it with water. But I've found that water has been a really good way for me to unlock other flavors that allow me to enjoy all the flavors together, as opposed to just immediately being hit with that kind of sulfurous note and going, no. But John might have a different take on it. So what are your thoughts, John?
I think it's a great question, Jamie. I mean, I don't have a problem with sulfur because I don't seem to get it as much as other people. Different people get different types of flavors more than others. So I don't have a problem. I quite like it, but certainly, and there's a lot of work goes on now to try and limit the sulfur element in the whiskey to begin with. I know there's a certain whiskey writer claims that it comes from a certain type of cask and all that. But I agree with Mads. I think if you have one which you think is too sulfury, I think dilution is going to help. Not because it just dilutes maybe that element of it, but it'll release other flavours, as Mads said. That's all I can suggest. But if you have if you're one of the people who have a real problem with sulphur, and I know there are a few people just turned off by it, it's just really try to avoid them. I mean, I fought a 41, for example, that we had before the second whiskey. I mean, that new make spirit is known to have some sulphury notes in the spirit. There wasn't any sulphury notes in my tasting of it. I don't know whether it was of yours. So I think that I think it's becoming less of a problem than it used to be.
Yeah.
I think there was a big sort of publicity about it maybe 8 or 10 years ago or something like that. I don't really know that it's been mentioned that much recently, but I would say dilute it, or maybe even iron brew.
I think as well, for me, part of I would still say I'm not 100% there, but in terms of recognizing sulfur, figuring out what it was quite helpful for me. So it seemed to be quite green and vegetal, a bit more like the raw cabbage than actual sulfur. So sometimes being able to identify what that note is for you helps you kind of work around it.
That's a good
So
point. That's a very good
definitely
point. Yeah, very good point. And that and
try.
that and that's where the the flavor profile typical flavors guide might be useful for you, Jamie. If you think it's sulfur, maybe have a look at that and say, well, actually, it's not really sulphur; it's something else. You know.
But I think that's actually quite a good time to move on to our final dram of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
evening,
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
we are running a bit over, and I
Sure,
appreciate
sure.
that. And the final dram of the evening is we're headed to Isla, and it's 53.376 Rekindled Romance, which is just beautiful way to end the evening, I think.
It's quite an incredible distillery, this, because it's the same peated malt specification as another distillery on Isla, but the actual new make spirit is completely different, you know. And people say that it's so of its place. The famous whiskey writer Michael Jackson, no, the whiskey writer, not the other one. Okay, he said the best Scotch whiskies taste of the mountain heather, the peat, the seaweed, the taste of Scotland. Now I think when you taste this whiskey, you know, wherever you are in the world, I think you're back on that island. You know, I was talking to Jim McCheyne a couple of years ago at the Isla Whiskey Academy, and he used to travel the world, as you know. He spent a lot of his career at Bowmore and then Bruichladdich until his final kind of working years. He was at Ardnahoe. But when he toured the world, he said to me, you know, when I'm in Asia and I've done 7 tastings in 5 days and I'm feeling pretty tired, and I go back to my hotel and I go out in the veranda late at night looking over the city of Taipei, whatever it is, and I pour myself a large Lafroig and I'm right back home again in that moment, you know. And I thought it was a great story. I always wonder why he never said Bowmore or Bruichladdich. He said he said Lafroig, but I could get exactly what he means, you know. And I think this is one of these.
Yeah,
I mean, even
definitely.
though most of it is not matured on the island, okay, we know that, but it's still got that. I think that association with the island.
And it is just quite a magical place. I mean, I will admit it now. My first trip to Isla was with the society in 2019, just after I'd kind of taken on my job here, and I did not particularly enjoy Pete. And I was going to Isla, and everyone said, "Oh well, this is going to be fun for you to go to all of the open days and when you don't like peated whiskey." But actually, it was exactly the baptism by fire that I needed to kind of try it. And when you have it there, it's a very special thing. So if you get the chance to go. But also, it is, as John said, it's kind of a memory thing. You know, when I nose this whiskey, it's briny. There's some metal filings there. I get some frazzles, which I quite often get from this distillery. Um, Whiskey Julian, barbecue ribs with sauce, and Bingham, smoky seaweed, beach fire fueled with seaweed, completely, possibly on Isla, but could be other elsewhere as well.
Sure. I can tell you a little story. This distillery was completely rebuilt in the 70s. And about 10 or 12 years ago, it went through a big refurb and a lot of new technology was used to make the whiskey. And I did a tour, and sometimes people criticise it and say it's just one man with a button now. So I did a tour of the distillery with the manager a couple of years ago, and he said to me, I get really angry when people say we're just one man with a button because we've got 3 working shifts here. There's 3 men with a button. I'd say something else. The Isla sense of humour, you can't beat it. You can't beat the locals, you know.
And Whiskey Julian's going to experience that because he's going to Isla for 4 days in March, and it's a bit of a pilgrimage. It is. Even you think that, and then you go there, and you're like, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'll be in Isla too last week in October, a few weeks' time,
Mm.
at the Isla Whiskey Academy again. So I'm so much looking forward to that. It's been a couple of years since I've been able to go.
Mm. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I've missed it, having gotten to experience all of the kind of festival hubbub of Campbelltown and Isla. I'm keen to experience that and also add Speyside into the mix as well.
When I put a bit of water in this, I said, wait, what happened to the brininess? Because all of a sudden it was cooked nuts and a kind of a fish batter, but then it all came flooding back to me again, you know. So it was good.
Claire's got quite a good tasting note there. She says it reminds her of honey on crumpets in front of a smoky log fire.
Yeah.
That is like a perfect memory there.
Sure.
And Julian says he's paired it with some chorizo, which sounds like it would. I think that would go really well. I also think frazzles would go quite well with this. Actually,
sure.
And it seems actually both Stephen and Jonathan are saying that it's their favorite dram of the evening. So absolutely, please let us know which dram has been your favorite. If you are curious as to what everyone was most excited to try before this tasting, before anyone had tried the drams, the winner on Instagram was the 35.293. So the first dram we tried, and the winner on Twitter was the 53.376, which we're enjoying now. And Russ has got some barbecue chicken, and he said it's a winner. So cheers.
Yeah. Mine's would be between number 2, the 41, and this one. Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I find peated whiskies are quite a nice way to end the tasting, and also at this time of year where you're out and it's a bit colder when it's dark and people have started, getting the fires on and things. Well, maybe not quite yet, but I definitely smelt wood smoke the other night when I was walking home, and it just made me think peated dram, fireside, sit there and enjoy it.
There's an interesting debate going on at the moment, Mads, about peat and what we do with it in the future, because obviously it takes 10,000 years to replace 1 metre of it. But the Scotch whisky industry is responsible for, I think it's less than 5% of all the peat dug up. So, but I think that there is some anxiety over that. Scotland, in terms of peat bog per hectare, is 17th in the world. So we have plenty of stuff, but we've been digging it up for various reasons, not just whiskey, for many years.
Yeah. I'm seeing. Sorry. Go ahead.
No. So I mean, it's one of those questions that's going to get bigger and bigger, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm seeing some varying things coming in here about favourite drams for the night. Whiskey Julian saying it's the 53. Ewan Pearson saying it's the 68. Fairview Sophie says 41, and Keith and Daniel both say 41, and that was the biggest surprise of the night.
Fair spread.
Charles P has got an excellent comment and said, my father-in-law just exclaimed, "This one smells like a garden centre," which is a great tasting note. I mean, yeah, I get the kind of like fertilizer. Yeah. And Frank's had quite a good pairing. He's got mature cheddar on Orkney beer meal oatcakes, which sounds delicious.
Great stuff.
But yeah, I think I'm probably leaning towards this 53 as well.
So I think so far, if I'm reading it properly, the favourite seemed to be 41, 53 so far. Did anybody say something else?
Ewan said 68.
68, okay, yeah. 68, okay.
And Frank, who's it's their first tasting, they've said 35 and 53. Oh,
good. So it is well spread then. So 35. Does anybody think that 82-35 was a favourite? Maybe Russ does.
Well, and some of these bottlings are still available. So if
Daniel said, he was
82.
That was
biggest surprise was the 82.
82, yeah, okay.
And if you do fancy getting your hands on one of these bottles, we do 3 of the bottles from this tasting are still available. So if you fancy one, the 53 is still there and available, and a nice one as the nights are getting a bit darker.
Especially
But
where you
yeah,
are at the moment, Mads. It's getting dark down here. Must be dark where you are, yeah.
It was dark when I left the house this morning, and it was getting dark when I got home.
Oh, I know. I hate it when that happens.
But you know, there's something quite nice about when you get home then. And I think as well, there's something to be said for, even though it's shorter, the days are shorter, there's something to be said for taking the time to actually sit down with a dram on a dark evening in front of a fire, if you happen to be lucky enough to have one, and just sitting there and enjoying it and you know, taking it all in.
It's a great comment there from Ian McIntosh, Mads. Could you put it back up, Laura? Yeah, he's just saying that what he's discovered is that he's starting to enjoy a much wider range of flavours. That's great, Ian. That's great, Ian. That's what we're trying to achieve here with our members, you know. Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I think if there's no more questions, we're going to wrap things up slowly. So the next virtual tasting is going to be at the end of October, and it should be going on sale next week. And there'll be some very special pairings which are unique to our October theme. So keep your eyes out for that one. Our next outturn is scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m. So we'll see you there, bright and breezy. And I think it's been an absolute delight, John. I love co-hosting with you, but I'm going to hand it over to you to do a wee toast and say goodnight.
Thank you, Mads. I love co-hosting with you. Co-hosting with you too. We've always had such good fun. And thanks everybody for joining in and all of those comments. Fantastic. We have really enjoyed it, and it's really gives us the heart that you know, that we're doing great for our members.
And thank you to Laura as well, actually.
Oh yes, thanks Laura.
Who's pushed
of course.
all the buttons tonight and been there and just behind the scenes.
That's right. And it couldn't happen without Laura behind the scenes there. That's right. And so I usually like to finish with a toast or two. So I'm going to give you just two tonight. There's one of the toasts has got a story leading up to it and all that, but I don't think we'll get time for that. But just quite simply, the idea, ladies and gentlemen, that love makes the world go round, but whiskey makes it go round a little faster. But tonight I'm going to throw in one I don't think I've used before. Since we the whole gathering stuff, it's been about 60s music and all that. Is that right, Mads? Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've got your hippie gear on there, haven't you?
I do. Yeah? I've got my head. Yeah.
So I've got a quote from a very famous man here, a musician. I mean, not exactly a kind of rock guy or anything like that. But this guy said, alcohol may be man's worst enemy. But the Bible says, love your enemy. And that was Frank Sinatra. So Slán Jivar, folks. It's great to see you. I hope to see you again soon.
Slán Jivar.
Slán Jivar.